The Enterprise's terraforming mission to Doraf 1 has been cancelled. Vulcans have some strange concoction they call mint, but Amanda doesn't recognize it. And Klim Dokachin once found a 14-foot Kaldorian eel on board a freighter in someone's locker. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 7, Unification 1, story by Rick Berman and Michael Piller, teleplay by the legendary Jerry Taylor, directed by Sirach's pal Les Landau. This was November 2nd, 1991. We have a very, very special guest today, everybody. We're super excited. Leonard Nimoy's son himself, Adam Nimoy. How are you today, Adam?
All good in the hood. Thank you for having me.
And he's got the Vulcan salute ready.
Yeah.
I love it. Man,
well,
this
first
is so
of all,
cool.
First of all, I want to say, I told you before, and I want to repeat this because, Adam, your father to me has always been the gold standard of what Star Trek is about. I think the performances he gave as Spock are hands down, unbeatable, and set the precedent of what science fiction storytelling is about, which is, curiosity, exploring, challenging the mind to think critically about subject matter. And I think he pushed the envelope in that regards through his portrayal of Spock, as well as any other character. I've been the biggest fan of your father since the beginning. And aside from my own personal bias to Captain Sisko, Spock is my favorite character. And
wow.
Yeah, and I've always felt that way. I just think his performance is riveting. I think he understands drama to a high level. Just without saying things, he's able to express things through his facial expressions. He communicates very well the emotional undertone of the scene. And the camera loves him. The camera loves him. So, when you add all of those qualities, not to mention, I'm sure, the intellect that he brings, the world experience. You can see by his performance that he's an educated, learned, well-traveled, person who has read a lot and understands the human condition, I think, to an excellent degree. And that's what resonates through the film on me. That's why I've always had a special love for your father. And seeing him in this episode was, such a treasure, such a pleasure. Lending his credibility to this show as well, I felt was another thing that he was doing in honor of the tradition of the Star Trek family, which has also carried on to this day. All of us have our own kind of branch in the family tree of Star Trek. And I think his appearance in this episode was a honoring of that tradition of passing the torch, of recognizing the family. And having said all of that, Adam, I just want to say, yes, I love your father. He's excellent and exceptional. And I actually love for you to kind of piggyback on some of that and give us background about, who he was and what he brought to the table.
Well, Sirach, thank you. That's so kind of you and generous. I really appreciate all that. My dad gave a lot of himself to the franchise, and I think he was really proud of the fact that he was in the original pilot, the only cast member other than Majel Barrett, who was in the original pilot episode. Everybody else was changed out by the time they got to the second pilot. And then continued on through the franchise, and then made it into The Next Generation, and then made it into the movies, and then made it into, which happened actually before The Next Generation was 91. The movie started in 1980. And he was very proud of the fact that he showed up in the J.J. Abrams reincarnation of Star Trek, kind of bookended his whole life. And he just gave a lot of himself to the whole project. I think he really loved the work. As you say, it's about the human condition. That's what my dad was all about, is what can you say about the human condition and being, half human, half alien. As Kirk says in the eulogy at the end of Wrath of Khan, he was one of the most human people he had ever come across. because my dad had a lot of sense of humanity, and also the dedication to the people making Star Trek. One of the stories that's legion is the fact that when they came up with the animated series in the 70s, my dad wouldn't do it unless George Takei was in it and Nichelle Nichols was in it. They were going to use other people's voices for them, but he didn't feel that was right because it's about an integrated universe, IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations, and he wasn't going to participate if they weren't going to participate. So my dad was very much the heart and soul of what Star Trek's all about.
Mm-hmm.
I see that on full display every time he's on camera. And you mentioned the J.J. Abrams. I really like the J.J. Abrams. I know there's discussion about that, but his performance in that was spectacular. I happen to have seen that. And, seeing him essentially age in front of people, it's one of the distinctions that I have, having grown up in front of people on my show. And now when they see me, they say, "Oh my God, you've aged," and so you age in front of people on this show, and the grace with which he did it, the poise, the integrity that he kept all the way till the end. He held it with dignity, and he represented it with, right till the very end with the same passion, with the same fervor, with the same intensity and energy that he always did.
Yeah. Thank you, Sirach. Yeah, we've seen a lot of people age through the years in Star Trek. It's a long franchise, and I remember the pilot of Deep Space Nine when you were a boy, and you were fabulous, by the way.
Awesome.
I mean, I was following David Carson around, the guy who directed the pilot. I was a big fan of David's, and was watching everything he was doing, looking at the dailies, and your stuff was just terrific from beginning to end. Watching you grow on the show was quite spectacular. I think you did a great job, and thank you for all that as well.
Oh, well, thank you. I had the pleasure of being one link in the chain, and I was surrounded by tremendous people, as you attest to, with the people that were involved with creating the show, and Leonard's commitment to those people. I felt like it's an ensemble. We have people behind the camera, we have the writers, we have all of the people working together as a unit, much like the crew of a ship.
Exactly.
And so no one person really can take all the credit for anything. It's a collaborative issue, but certainly some people shine more than others, and that's where I feel like your father did an exceptional job of shining when his opportunity came, and there's no really debating that, based on the success that he had. Did he mention anything about this particular episode, this time of doing Next Generation?
Well, not only did he mention something, actually, let me prompt you here, because Adam sent this in, which is so cool. And this was, I guess, shot maybe just a year or a year and a half before you were filming The Emissary, the first episode of Deep Space Nine. So this is actually very close in time to what you guys were talking about when Adam was saying he was following David Carson around. But check this out.
Yeah.
Who are these fine fellows on the set of Star Trek?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow. Amazing. Obviously in the cave set. What can you tell us about this, Adam?
Well, I mean, on this season of The Next Generation, I was sitting around observing. I wanted to start directing, and I was watching Nick Meyer make Star Trek VI, the last the feature films with the original cast, and when that was over, I was trying to figure out what else I should do. And my dad said, "Go talk to Rick Berman about observing on The Next Generation. You should talk to him right away and try to get a gig on that show." And so Rick's kind of condition was, he was nice enough to invite me in, but I had to observe everybody for an entire season, including Les Landau and Cliff Bole. They did part 1 and part 2 of Unification. So I was on the set when they were shooting almost that entire episode, and talking with my dad. I mean, we would talk between take. That picture is kind of unusual, because usually my dad did not want to have a conversation while he was on set and in character. It was just, he just didn't like going in and out. He wanted to stay in the zone, the Spock zone. And that was something I had experienced as a very young kid. I mean, I was on the set of the original series when I was 10, and my dad was like, "Don't talk to me, don't bother me," because he wanted to stay in character. So it was very generous of him to spend the time between takes talking about what the show was about and what I was learning on the set. I love following both Les Landau and Cliff Bole, fabulous very different directors, and David Carson, as I said, all with their own sense of style and technique and just system of breaking down scripts and directing. But it was a really great education to be there and watching them, and it was a privilege to be there. I mean, everybody was there was a lot of energy on the set because my dad was on the episode, and I think it really, everybody stepped up. Everybody in the cast, particularly Patrick and Brent, who had a lot of scenes with my dad, really stepped up their game. And the other great thing about that episode is this is really episode 8, the second part of the two-parter. Is Malachi Throne is in the episode now. Malachi Throne is in one of my favorite original series episodes, which is the Menagerie, where Spock is court-martialed, and they incorporated the Cage, the original pilot episode, into that two-parter. So very, just a great experience. I'm so privileged to be there and watch. And as you said, Sirach, I mean, the crew is just amazing on The Next Generation. I mean, it really is. It's a tough gig. It's a collaborative art form, and I really got the sense of that watching how The Next Generation was made.
Wow. When the directors were, you had Les Landau, you had Cliff Bole. I mean, obviously, he knows already what his character is. I mean, how much direction can you give him on, at this point on Next Generation? But, I felt that it was amazing to see him with Picard. Just to the sense of seeing them together on camera was, this is a big moment here. I felt like this is a torch passing type moment. And it was big for me to see him there. Was he excited about this opportunity to revisit the character on this particular episode?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was a privilege for him. I think he really was. He loved to put on the ears when there was a good piece of storytelling for which to do it. I mean, there was some issues later on with Generations because he's not in Generations, the first transition film between the original cast and the TNG cast, because he felt there wasn't enough for him to be doing. But this episode was so well conceived, with Jerry Ryan and Michael Piller and Rick Berman, story wise, and I think it's Michael Piller's script. He really felt there was something to be said here. There was really some good storytelling, and he could get into the character and develop the character more. And I just think, and the opportunity to work with Patrick, after that, Patrick started showing up to social functions at my dad's house with Rick Berman. So I mean,
nice.
I think it was a very good experience. My dad was really happy to be, participating.
And Adam, you said that you started.
And you mentioned.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say you started doing the director in training thing that Rick Berman and company would do. Did you start with this two-parter, or had you started previously?
Well, by this time, I'm sorry, I got a crazy mutt here. Hey, come over here.
Is that? I noticed you muted yourself for a second. I guess that's why.
I did. I got rid of her for a minute. I by this time I had been taking classes. Hold on a second. Let me get her off the door. Come here.
Well, the reason I ask, if you can still hear us, the reason I ask is because I wanted to know if you kind of touched on it, but did you notice a different vibe around the set? You kind of mentioned that maybe you had, but what you're saying is you had been around the set previously to know that for this two-parter, for when your dad was there was certainly a different vibe, and there was certainly a difference in the energy on set.
Yeah, I mean, I've been with them all season. This is episode 7 and 8, so I had been with them up until this time. Getting to know everybody who was making the show, and oh my God, hold the roll.
Yeah, no, I guess if it's funny because this reminds me of the David Livingston interview that we did when Livingston was talking about being put in the director and training program and how he went through, I think he said therapy in order to deal with the emotional stress of it as well. But yeah, David Livingston also talked to us about this director and training program that Rick Berman had for that he went through.
Well, there were a lot of people directed, were given a shot at directing on the show, which was to Rick's credit that he was generous enough to open that up to people. And Jonathan Frakes went on to have a pretty good career, after that. So yeah, I'd been on the set for some time and got to know the crew, and I got very tight with Marvin Rush, the DP, who moved over to Deep Space Nine, as you know, and how things work. I mean, it was a really great education. That was kind of Rick's condition, but there was definitely a change in the energy on the set when they were going to be doing this two-parter with my dad. It was kind of a noticeable. Everybody was on their best game. I think it's an outstanding episode. It's really episode 8. I mean, Spock appears in 7, but then it's episode 8 where the story really begins. Everybody was. It was just a very exciting time. I'm glad I was there to witness it. I mean, I just learned a lot from watching them make the show. And the same thing happened in Star Trek 6. In between takes, my dad would sit with me and we'd talk about the production and what's going on and sort of the issues that they have to deal with and the timing. Again, very different technique and style. I mean, learning from David Carson's very specific about what he did, had a specific cut list, which is something that I really aspired to. He had everything cut in his mind before he even shot that show to make sure he had all the film he needed. Les Landau, very aggressive with the camera, very innovative with the work. Cliff Ball was just a really really good nuts and bolts director, very well prepared, a little more conservative than David Carson or Les, but very in control of the set, knew what he wanted, had a clear vision. I think he handled my dad very well. You can't really tell these guys. I mean, I found this. I knew this right away because I started directing in season 6. These guys know their character. You're not going to be telling them anything about that. What they don't know as well, and this is what my dad told me, is they don't know the story. They don't know the script as well as the director because we've been living with the script for 8 days in prep, breaking it down. So we know what's coming and what the nuance is and what the potential is, what the objectives are. We have a little more insight on that. We have more insight with guest actors. We have more input with, in terms of what their role is and what they're going to be doing. And style and technique, as I was talking about, we have some input on that. But I mean, you can't reinvent the show. That's not allowed. They're going to come down and, the producers are going to come down and hit you for that one, or you'll never come back. You got to shoot the show. But but there's ways to push the envelope and show your own kind of style and technique. And I talked to my dad a lot about that. And Les would say, and David Carson, the same thing. They were very big on transitions. How we go from one scene to another, and what can we do that's innovative and different? Is it a dissolve? Is it a camera move? Is it a push in? It's an actor's moving. I mean, they both those two guys in particular were very specific about from one scene to another. What does the transition look like? So a lot to learn, big learning curve while I was there.
Hey, Adam, we only have you for another minute or two here, so a couple super quick questions. The first one is just, of all the directors you watched on the set of Star Trek, which one would you say you modeled your directing the most off of? And then secondarily, please tell us about the book you've got out right now.
Sure. I'd love to. I got to let the dog back in.
So everybody, stay tuned for that. Keep up the intensity and the drama, though.
Speaking of transitions,
Okay, here we are, back again. I mean, a lot of it, I'd say, Les and David Carson I followed the most because those are guys I just clicked with those guys and really wanted to, they really set the bar, I think, for me, just in my experience. I mean, there was a lot of great directors that went through, and And as I say, Jonathan Frakes and even David Livingston's work, it was excellent work. There's no doubt about it. Those guys I really clicked with, and they were very welcoming to me, and I really got into their process. David Carson, because he had very, very specific type of approach to prepping the script, breaking it down. And as I said, he had something that most directors don't have, which is a cut list. He had an idea before even going into the scene about how that scene would cut together. And for me, that was very important, because then specifically what film you absolutely have to have. It's not, a lot of directors, they do this garden hose variety of directing in which they shoot a master, they shoot some over the shoulders, they shoot some close-ups, and then let the editor figure it out. They just turn in all the film. But that's not the way David worked. And I really modeled myself after that, because I had a lot of editors who knew exactly what I was doing. And a lot of times I go in and give a couple of notes and it would be done. Some editors couldn't quite follow the game plan. But when you have a cut list, then the editors really can see what you're doing and what your intention is, what your style is, and and how that scene really should cut together.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of my book, I wrote this book, The Most Human.
Beautifully named.
Leonard Nimoy. We just published in June of last year. I've been all over the country promoting it. I was at the Star Trek convention in Vegas last year, and talking a lot of fans across the country. It's really the book is about my relationship with my dad. It's about Star Trek. It's about how 12-step recovery that my dad and I were both in enabled us to reconcile our relationship. We had a lot of trouble in the relationship with one another. I mean, my relationship with my dad was up and down. It was great moments like being on Star Trek with him and learning from him about the craft of directing. But then whenever we had a difference of opinion, very strident verbal assaults on one another when we didn't see eye to eye. And it wasn't until the last years of his life, around 2006, that he passed away almost exactly 10 years ago. It'll be the end of this month. So from 2006 to 2015, we were very close. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were both, dealing with recovery issues. So it's been a great experience. As I said, I've been all over the country talking about it, celebrating our relationship, and I was always proud of my dad from the very beginning. When I was on the set at age 9, really before the show, the original series even aired.
Mm-hmm. Well, Adam, we know you have to run. But we really appreciate you taking the time today. And the book, continued success with the book, and you've got Spock toys, you got Spock pop-ups. This is great stuff. I've got a lot of Spock figure. I've got that Spock figure. I'll tell you that much. I do. But anyway, Adam, sorry.
Thank
go ahead,
you.
Sirach.
No, I want to say thank you, Adam. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I wanted to just highlight a couple things that popped out that really rang true to me. You mentioned your father not taking the animation job unless they hired Takei and Michelle. I thought that's an example of something that reminded me what Avery would do, how he approaches work. You also mentioned he felt like there was nothing for him to do in the crossover film, and so he didn't feel a need to be in it. Another way that I feel is similar to how Avery would approach work. What is the meaning? Why am I here? What am I doing?
Is it just fan service, or is this something good?
Yeah, and I think that's high level. That's the high level thinking that a great actor comes into performances with. Why am I here? What are we doing? What is the message? What's the story? So I'm kudos to that. Plus, also fighting on behalf of disenfranchised people. That's also an example of greatness. And then lastly, I want to say I'm glad that you had that window of opportunity to reconcile with your father during the closing years of his life, which ironically is what Sarek and Spock did not do in this first episode. And so that was fixed in real life between the two of you. And I think that's also something to commend. So thank you again, Adam. I really love talking with you, and I hope to see you again on the show.
Well, Sirach, I just want to say in closing, thank you for mentioning that, the complicated relationship between Spock and Sarek. I mean, that is one of the subplots of what's going on in Unification, and it's very interesting how it gets reconciled with the mind meld, between Spock and Picard. So Yeah, it's interesting how life imitates art sometimes.
It's a powerful parallel right there.
Yeah, that was the case for us.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, thank you again for the opportunity. Live long and prosper, as always. I hope to see you guys again.
Absolutely. Everybody stick around. We've got more on this episode in just a minute. Adam Nimoy is amazing. Thank you so much. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule.